And Nataliya Ilyushina is an economist at RMIT and joins us now from Melbourne. Nataliya Ilyushina, welcome. So before we get into the detail of the decision, how do you think this all went overall with this brand new setup, a media conference after the announcement came through?
It's definitely a good development that the RBA Governor is explaining things and elaborating. However, the opening speech was quite short, and I was expecting a little bit more from that, but thankfully media commentators helped to elaborate and explain more.
Yeah, you can always rely on the journalists, Nataliya. OK, so the clear message is that things are evenly poised and inflation still has to come down. Let's hear what she said in response to one of the questions.
We haven't ruled anything out and we haven't ruled anything in. So I would say we have maintained the option that it might be that there has to be more rate rise, but there might not be either. Nothing's in, nothing's out. The optionality here really needs to be maintained because we need to be driven by the data. And I'd come back to the point that I made earlier. I really understand that the mortgage holders are sweating on this. I do understand that. But the big issue that's confronting not just mortgage holders, but everyone, is inflation.
Yeah, so there seemed to be this perception in the community that the only way from here was down, but Michele Bullock was making it very clear that there's still a possibility that interest rates could go up from here. What did you make of that?
There is absolutely a sense that anything can happen, and specifically so she mentioned that they don't expect for inflation to reach the target rate up until 2025. And that tells us that anything can happen in between. Having said that, there is also a strong sense of economy stabilizing because all the indicators has been very stable, and growth is smooth, and the inflation is getting under control. So even if there are increases, there won't be many of them, maybe one at most.
OK, now on to a question put to her on what keeps her up at night, put to her by our very own David Chow. She said she'd like to say nothing keeps her up at night, but then went on with an interesting response on the labour market. Let's take a listen.
I think the thing that worries me is that we get some more shocks, and we don't know where they're coming from. You look at the last few years, pandemic, Ukraine, Middle East. What's going to come from left field? That's what worries me. What I don't know is coming, and what the implications of that might be for inflation and inflation expectations, and how do we handle it?
Yeah, and so, Nataliya, that unemployment figure will be closely watched?
Yes, absolutely. Unemployment started creeping up, but what we need to understand, inflation and employment, they go opposite in reverse to each other. And when we get inflation under control, employment goes up. And as Michele correctly pointed out, there have been so many things happening in the last few years that it's impossible to predict another war or another pandemic. And the role of RBA is to respond to the current economic situation. And she doesn't have a crystal ball, evidently.
And finally, there's been a lot of discussion about the danger of the government's changes to the stage 3 tax cuts possibly adding to inflation. But she had a pretty direct answer to that. Let's take a listen.
The bottom line really is that the fiscal envelope is the same. It's the same amount of money being handed to households. It's distributed slightly differently. But we don't think it has any implications for our forecasts.
And Nataliya, do you agree with that analysis?
I would not agree with the statement that fiscal envelope is the same when we just got tax cut delivered. That means, there's not more money handed out, but there's more money retained by the public. But having said that, what we need to understand, the timing of it, it's possible that Michele refers to at the moment the tax cuts are not taking effect. They will take effect in the next financial year. So for her decision about rates today, indeed, the fiscal envelope is the same, but it's not going to stay the same in the future, and that will be factored in the future RBA decisions. OK,
Nataliya Ilyushina, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
The Coalition has agreed to support the federal government's changes to the Stage 3 income tax cuts. The legislation will take effect from July and provide more relief to low and middle income earners.